Pay my debt and I'll save you from prison. A cleaning lady whispers this to a billionaire convicted of murder. She's never met before. Julian Cross was 42 years old, 6'3", with sharp cheekbones that had graced the covers of Forbes and Business Insider. His salt and pepper hair, always perfectly swept back, now hung limp and greasy against his forehead. 3 weeks ago, he'd been untouchable, CEO of Crosstech Industries, a billion-dollar AI empire, a man who dined with senators and owned a penthouse view of the city skyline. Now, he was inmate number 447231. The murder charge had come out of nowhere. His business rival, Gregory Ashford, had been found dead in Julian's office building, stabbed twice in the chest, Julian's letter opener buried in his ribs. The prosecution had security footage, Julian's fingerprints on the weapon, and a motive the size of a skyscraper. Ashford had been preparing to expose Crosstech's financial fraud, a scandal that could have destroyed Julian overnight. Julian's lawyer, a shark named Pemberton, had promised him an acquittal. But the jury took 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. 25 years to life. He'd watched his empire crumble on the courthouse steps. Cameras flashing. Reporters screaming. His ex-wife turning her face away, their teenage daughter crying into her hands. Now he sat in a 6x8 cell that reeked of sweat and bleach, surrounded by men who'd done things he couldn't imagine. He'd been jumped twice in his first week. A gang member named Casco had taken his commissary money and smiled while doing it. Julian didn't sleep anymore. He just stared at the ceiling and wondered how a man could lose everything in 72 hours. Deborah Kane was 51 years old, 5'4", with deep brown skin that had weathered decades of double shifts and missed meals. Her hands were strong, calloused from years of scrubbing floors and lifting industrial mop buckets. She had soft, tired eyes, the kind that had seen too much but refused to harden. A slight gap between her front teeth made her smile disarming, though she rarely smiled anymore. She worked 3 jobs: morning custodian at St. Augustus Hospital, afternoon housekeeper at the Grandview Hotel, and weekend shifts cleaning offices downtown. She hadn't had a day off in 2 years. And still, it wasn't enough. Her daughter Imani was 23, a brilliant, bright-eyed pre-med student at State University. Imani had been diagnosed with stage 3 lymphoma 8 months ago. The treatments were experimental, not covered by insurance. The hospital bills had climbed past $340,000. Deborah had drained her savings, maxed out every credit card, taken loans from people she barely knew. Last week, a man named Vincent Rourke, a loan shark with dead eyes and a taste for expensive cigars, had cornered her outside the hospital. "You've got 2 weeks, Deborah. Then I start taking things that matter." He didn't mean furniture. Imani didn't know how bad it was. Deborah kept smiling, kept telling her baby girl that everything was fine, that the treatments were working, that Mama had it handled. But Deborah was drowning. It was a Thursday afternoon when Deborah walked into County Correctional for the first time. She wasn't there for herself. Her coworker, Gloria, had a son locked up on a drug charge. Good kid, bad choices. Gloria had begged Deborah to visit him, to bring him a Bible and some encouragement. "He listens to you, Deb. You got that way about you." Deborah didn't want to go. Prisons made her chest tight. But Gloria had covered her shift last month when Imani's fever spiked, so she owed her. The visiting room was loud, crying babies, shouted conversations in Spanish, guards barking orders. Deborah sat across from Gloria's son, Terrence, a skinny 19-year-old with cornrows and a regretful face. She prayed with him, told him to keep his head down, to take the classes they offered. And then, as she stood to leave, she saw him. Julian Cross. She recognized him immediately, not from the news, though his face had been everywhere. No, she recognized him because she'd cleaned his office 6 months ago. Crosstech had hired her company for a one-time deep clean before a board meeting. She'd vacuumed his private conference room, wiped down his marble desk, emptied his trash. She remembered him clearly, tall, handsome, distracted. He'd barely looked at her. just nodded once and kept typing on his laptop. Now he sat 3 tables over, hunched in an orange jumpsuit, his face gaunt and pale. A man across from him, his lawyer maybe, was packing up a briefcase, shaking his head. Julian's shoulders sagged. The lawyer stood and walked away. Julian stayed. Deborah watched as he pressed his palms flat against the table, his breath shallow and quick. His eyes were red. His jaw clenched. He looked like a man staring into his own grave. And something inside Deborah stirred. She didn't know why. She didn't know him. But she'd spent her whole life reading people, the way they held their hands, the rhythm of their breathing. She'd cleaned the homes of the dying, the offices of the corrupt, the hospital rooms of the broken. Julian Cross wasn't guilty. She didn't know how she knew. But she did. Deborah glanced at the clock. Visiting hours were almost over. She had 15 minutes before the guards started clearing the room. She looked back at Julian. Pay my debt, and I'll save you. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to smash that subscribe button for more. Also, share your thoughts, and let me know where you're watching from. Tomorrow's story is going to be just as epic, so don't miss out. Now, let's continue. The thought came to her like a voice, not hers, but something older, steadier. Her heart pounded. Her hands shook. And before she could second-guess herself, Deborah Kane stood up, walked across the visiting room, and sat down in the empty chair across from Julian Cross. He looked up, startled. She leaned forward and whispered, "I know you didn't kill him." Julian froze. "And I know how to prove it." Julian's eyes narrowed. His voice came out raw, barely above a whisper. "Who the hell are you?" Deborah didn't flinch. She kept her gaze steady, her hands folded on the table between them. "My name is Deborah Kane. I cleaned your office 6 months ago. You don't remember me. Most people don't remember the help." Julian's jaw tightened. He glanced toward the guards, then back at her. "Lady, I don't know what kind of game you're." "The night Gregory Ashford died," Deborah interrupted, her voice calm but firm, "you weren't alone in that building." Julian went still. "I was there." The air between them thickened. Julian leaned forward, his breath catching. "What are you talking about?" Deborah's fingers trembled slightly, but her voice stayed even. "I work overnight shifts cleaning offices downtown. Crosstech is one of my accounts. I was on the 14th floor that night, your floor. I saw someone leave your office around 11 p.m. It wasn't you." Julian's face drained of color. You saw someone?" "A man. White. Mid-40s. Expensive suit. He was in a hurry, practically ran to the elevator. He had blood on his sleeve." Julian's hands gripped the edge of the table, so hard his knuckles went white. "Why didn't you come forward? Why didn't you tell the police?" Deborah's expression darkened. "I tried." She exhaled slowly, her eyes distant, reliving the memory. "The morning after it happened, I called the police. Told them what I saw. They took my statement over the phone, said a detective would follow up. And no one ever called. I went to the precinct myself 2 days later. Waited 3 hours. Finally, a detective named Caraway saw me. I told him everything, the time, the man, the blood." Julian's pulse hammered in his ears. "What did he say?" Deborah's voice went quiet. "He said I was mistaken. Said the security footage showed you were the only one in the building that night. He told me if I kept making up stories, I could be charged with obstruction of justice." "That's bullshit," Julian hissed. "The footage was tampered with. My lawyer suspected it, but we couldn't prove it." "I know," Deborah said, "because I saw the man who did it." Julian's breath stopped. "The man I saw leaving your office? I recognized him 2 weeks later. I was cleaning the lobby of the district attorney's building downtown." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. He works there. I saw his name on an office directory. Assistant District Attorney, Brian Hollis. He's one of the prosecutors on your case. The room seemed to tilt. Julian felt like the floor had been ripped out from under him. Hollis, he whispered. That son of a bitch. He's the one who built the case against me. He's the one who... He stopped, his mind racing. Ashford was going to expose financial fraud at Crosstech. But what if it wasn't just my company? What if Hollis was involved? What if Ashford found out and Hollis killed him to cover it up? Deborah nodded slowly. That's what I think. And I think he framed you because you were the perfect scapegoat. Rich, powerful, with a motive everyone would believe. Julian stared at her, his chest heaving. Why are you telling me this now? Why didn't you go to the press? Why didn't you? Because no one listens to women like me, Deborah said quietly. I'm a black cleaning lady with no degree, no connections, no money. You think anyone's going to believe me over a white prosecutor with a badge and a law degree? Julian's face fell. He knew she was right. But you, Deborah continued, her voice gaining strength, you've got resources. You've got lawyers. You've got people who'll listen, if you're still alive to fight. I'm buried, Julian said bitterly. My assets are frozen. My legal team abandoned me. I've got nothing. You've got me, Deborah said. Julian stared at her. And I've got proof. Julian's heart slammed against his ribs. What kind of proof? Deborah reached into her jacket pocket, slowly, so the guards wouldn't react, and pulled out a small, folded piece of paper. She slid it across the table. Julian opened it. It was a photocopy of a security badge access log. That's from the building's backup system, Deborah whispered. The one the police didn't check. It shows Hollis swiped into the building at 10:47 p.m. the night Ashford died. He left at 11:03 p.m. Julian's hands shook as he stared at the paper. How did you get this? I know people. Custodians see everything. We're invisible, but we talk. Julian looked up at her, his eyes wet. Why are you doing this? You don't even know me. Deborah's voice softened. Because I know what it's like to be powerless. To be accused of something you didn't do, and have no one believe you. She paused. And because I need your help too. Julian frowned. What do you mean? Deborah's composure cracked, just slightly. Her eyes glistened. My daughter is dying. She has cancer. I owe $340,000 in medical bills. If I don't pay it in 2 weeks, the people I borrowed from are going to hurt her. Or worse. Julian's stomach dropped. You want me to pay your debt? Yes. I told you, my accounts are frozen. I don't have access to. You have offshore accounts, Deborah said quietly. I saw the documents in your trash 6 months ago. Account numbers in the Cayman Islands. I didn't know what they were at the time, but I kept the papers. I looked them up later. Julian's face went pale. You kept my financial records? I kept everything I thought might matter someday. Call it intuition. Julian stared at her, his mind spinning. So this is a transaction. I pay your debt, you give me the evidence to clear my name. No, Deborah said firmly. This is a partnership. You pay my debt, I testify. I help you expose Hollis. And we both get our lives back. Julian sat back, his breath shallow. If I access those accounts, the feds will know. They'll add more charges. If you don't, Deborah said, you'll rot in here for a murder you didn't commit. And my daughter will die. The visiting room intercom crackled. 5 minutes remaining. Deborah leaned forward, her voice urgent. I'm not asking you to trust me, Mr. Cross. I'm asking you to trust yourself. You didn't kill Gregory Ashford. But if you don't fight, Hollis wins. And we both lose everything. Julian closed his eyes. His hands clenched into fists. When he opened them again, his voice was steady. How do I contact you? Deborah slid another piece of paper across the table, this one with a phone number scrawled in blue ink. You've got 72 hours to decide. After that, I disappear. And so does the evidence. She stood. Julian grabbed her wrist. Not hard, but desperate. Why should I believe you won't just take the money and run? Deborah looked down at him, and for the first time, she smiled, sad but real. Because, Mr. Cross, I'm a mother. And mothers don't run. She pulled her hand free and walked toward the exit. Julian watched her go, his heart pounding, his mind screaming. And then, just before she reached the door, he called out, "What's your daughter's name?" Deborah stopped. She didn't turn around. "Imani," she said softly. "It means faith." And then she was gone. Julian didn't sleep that night. He lay on his thin mattress, staring at the rusted springs of the bunk above him, Deborah's words looping through his mind like a broken record. "I saw someone leave your office. It wasn't you. Brian Hollis. You've got 72 hours. His cellmate, a wiry man named Rook who'd been locked up for armed robbery, snored loudly in the bunk below. The cell block was never quiet, constant echoes of coughing, cursing, metal doors clanging. But Julian barely heard any of it. His hands trembled as he replayed every detail of that night. He'd left the office at 9:30 p.m., early for him, but he'd had dinner plans with his daughter that he'd already canceled twice that week. Ashford had called him around 10 p.m. frantic, saying he needed to meet. Julian had ignored it. He was tired of Ashford's threats, tired of the back and forth. By morning, Ashford was dead, and Julian's world had imploded. Now, some cleaning lady was telling him she could prove his innocence, for a price. Julian sat up, his head in his hands. What if she's lying? What if this is a setup? What if she's working with someone, maybe even Hollis, to squeeze more out of me before I rot in here? He'd been burned before. His ex-wife had walked away with half his fortune. His CFO had embezzled millions before disappearing to Costa Rica. His own lawyer had billed him into oblivion and still lost the case. Trust was a currency Julian Cross no longer possessed. But then he thought about the look in Deborah's eyes. The way her voice had cracked when she mentioned her daughter. Imani. It means faith. Julian clenched his fists. He didn't believe in faith anymore. Across town, Deborah sat at her kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a mug of cold coffee. The apartment was small, one bedroom, peeling wallpaper, a window that overlooked a dumpster. Imani was asleep in the bedroom, her breathing labored even with the oxygen machine humming beside her bed. Deborah stared at her phone, willing it to ring. It didn't. She'd gambled everything on this. Walked into that prison, looked a stranger in the eye, and offered him a deal that could either save both their lives or destroy hers completely. What if he says no? What if he thinks I'm crazy? What if he tells the guards and they arrest me for trying to blackmail an inmate? Her hands shook. She set the mug down before she dropped it. The truth was, she didn't have 72 hours. She had 8 days before Vincent Rourke came to collect. And Rourke didn't take excuses. Last time she'd missed a payment, he'd shown up at the hospital and stood outside Imani's room, smiling through the window. Deborah had paid him everything she had left. It wasn't enough. She opened her laptop, a battered old thing she'd bought at a pawn shop, and pulled up the scanned documents she'd kept hidden for 6 months. The offshore account numbers. The access log showing Hollis at the scene. The photo she'd taken with her phone of the man in the blood-stained suit leaving Julian's building. It was all there. Her insurance policy. Her only leverage. But if Julian didn't bite, she had nothing. A soft cough came from the bedroom. Deborah stood quickly, moving to the door. Imani was awake, her eyes half open, her face pale and drawn. "Mama." "I'm here, baby." Deborah sat on the edge of the bed, smoothing Imani's hair back from her forehead. Her daughter's skin was hot to the touch. "You okay?" Imani whispered. "I'm fine. Go back to sleep." "You're lying." Deborah's throat tightened. Imani had always been too smart for her own good. "Mama, I know about the money." Deborah froze. "Baby." "I'm not stupid," Imani said, her voice weak but firm. "I know you're working yourself to death. I know the bills are killing you." Tears burned in Deborah's eyes. "You don't need to worry about that. You just need to rest and get better." "What if I don't get better?" "Don't say that." "Mama, listen to me." Imani's hand found hers, squeezing weakly. "If it's between the debt and me, let me go." "Stop it." "I mean it. I don't want you to destroy yourself for." "Imani Kane, you listen to me." Deborah's voice cracked, but it was steel underneath. "You are my daughter. You are my whole world. And I will move heaven and earth to keep you alive. Do you hear me?" Imani's eyes filled with tears. "I hear you, Mama." Deborah kissed her forehead and stayed there until Imani drifted back to sleep. Then she went back to the kitchen, sat down, and waited. At 6:47 a.m., Julian was escorted to the prison's law library, a cramped, outdated room where inmates could file appeals or meet with attorneys. He'd requested access under the pretense of reviewing case files. In reality, he was stalling. He had Deborah's number folded in his palm. All he had to do was call. The prison allowed one 15-minute call per week to non-attorneys. He'd been saving his. Julian sat at a corner table, staring at the payphone mounted on the wall. "Do it. Don't do it. She's lying. She's not." He thought about his daughter, Lily. 17 years old, brown eyes like her mother, stubborn like him. She'd stopped visiting after the second week. His ex-wife had told him Lily couldn't handle seeing him like this, broken, caged, guilty in everyone's eyes. Julian hadn't fought it. What could he say? "I'm innocent, sweetheart. Daddy didn't do it." She wouldn't believe him. No one did. Except, maybe, Deborah Kane. Julian stood. His legs felt like lead. He walked to the phone, picked up the receiver, and dialed. It rang twice. "Hello." Her voice was guarded, tense. "It's Julian Cross." Silence. Then, "I wasn't sure you'd call." "I'm not sure I should have." Another pause. "Mr. Cross, I don't have time for doubt. My daughter's dying. You're rotting in a cell. We either do this, or we both lose. So tell me right now, are you in, or am I wasting my time?" Julian closed his eyes. He thought of Lily. He thought of 25 years behind bars. He thought of Brian Hollis walking free, untouchable. He thought of Deborah's words. "Mothers don't run." "I need proof first," Julian said. "Real proof. Not just a piece of paper and a story." "You'll get it. But I need a deposit." "How much?" $50,000. Wired to an account I'll send you. It buys me 2 more weeks with the people I owe. And it buys you my testimony." "And if you take the money and disappear?" "Then you were right not to trust anyone," Deborah said. "But you'll still be in prison. And I'll still be burying my daughter." Julian's jaw clenched. "I'll wire the money tonight. But if you screw me, Deborah Kane, I will spend every resource I have left hunting you down." "Understood. And one more thing." "What?" "When this is over, when I'm free, you and I are going to have a very long conversation about what you saw in my trash." For the first time, Deborah almost laughed. "Deal." The line went dead. Julian hung up the phone, his heart racing. He'd just made a deal with a woman he didn't trust, using money he wasn't supposed to have, to chase evidence that might not exist. And somehow, it was the first thing that had felt right in weeks. The wire transfer went through at 11:43 p.m. that night. Julian had called in a favor from his former assistant, Nadia Reeves, one of the few people who still believed in him. She'd accessed the offshore account using encrypted passwords Julian whispered over a monitored prison line, praying the guards weren't paying attention. $50,000 vanished into an account number Deborah had texted him. Julian didn't sleep. Again. By morning, his phone privileges were revoked. A guard named Sergeant Mallory, a thick-necked man with dead eyes, pulled him aside during breakfast. "Cross. Warden wants to see you." Julian's stomach dropped. "Why?" "Move." He was escorted down a long corridor, past cells filled with men who watched him like wolves circling prey. Julian kept his eyes forward, his pulse hammering in his throat. The warden's office was sterile, white walls, a cheap metal desk, a single window overlooking the prison yard. Warden Eugene Briggs sat behind the desk, a man in his 60s with silver hair and a face like a disappointed father. Beside him stood Brian Hollis. Julian's blood turned to ice. Hollis was everything Deborah had described: mid-40s, sharp suit, cold blue eyes. He smiled when Julian entered, the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Mr. Cross. Good to see you adjusting to your new accommodations." Julian said nothing. Warden Briggs folded his hands. "We've been monitoring your communications, Cross. Recent financial activity flagged by the federal investigation into your assets." Julian's jaw tightened. "I'm allowed to manage my affairs." "Not when those affairs involve offshore accounts tied to ongoing fraud cases," Hollis said smoothly. $50,000 transferred last night to an untraceable account. Care to explain? Legal fees. Your attorney's already been paid. Try again. Julian stared him down. "Am I being charged with something, or are you just here to gloat?" Hollis's smile widened. "Just a friendly warning. You're already serving 25 to life. Don't make it worse by playing games you can't win." He leaned in close, his voice dropping to a whisper only Julian could hear. "Whatever you're planning, Cross, it won't work. You're mine now." Then he straightened, nodded to the warden, and left. Julian stood there, fists clenched, his mind racing. He knows. He knows I'm digging. Deborah got the alert on her phone at 7:32 a.m., $50,000 deposited. She stared at the screen, her hands shaking. It was real. He'd actually done it. She didn't have time to process it. She called Vincent Rourke immediately. "Deborah, you're 3 days early. Color me surprised. I've got $25,000 for you right now. The rest in 2 weeks. Silence. That wasn't the deal. It's a new deal. Take it or leave it. More silence. Then a low chuckle. You've got guts, I'll give you that. Fine. 25 now. But if I don't see the rest in 2 weeks, I'm taking your daughter's hospital room number to some friends of mine. Understand?" Deborah's voice didn't waver. Understood. She hung up and immediately wired the money. Then she sat down, her whole body trembling. Step 1, done. Now the hard part. She had to get Julian out of prison long enough to gather real evidence. And she had exactly one idea how to do it. 3 days later, Deborah walked into the law offices of Morton & Hale, a mid-tier firm downtown. She'd called ahead, claiming she had information about the Julian Cross case. The receptionist had been skeptical, but Deborah had dropped Hollis's name, and suddenly she had an appointment. She sat across from Peter Morton, a man in his 50s with thinning hair and a tired face. He'd been one of Julian's original defense attorneys before the trial went south and the firm distanced itself. "Ms. Kane, I appreciate you coming in, but I'm not sure what you think I can do. The Cross case is closed." It's not closed if he's innocent. Morton sighed. With all due respect, everyone in prison says they're innocent. I was there the night Gregory Ashford was murdered. I saw the real killer. Morton's pen stopped moving. Excuse me. Deborah pulled out a folder. Inside were copies of everything: the access logs, the photos, the timeline. Brian Hollis killed Gregory Ashford and framed Julian Cross. I can prove it. Morton stared at the documents, his face going pale. Do you have any idea what you're accusing? Hollis is a decorated prosecutor. If you're wrong. I'm not wrong. Even if you're right, this evidence is circumstantial at best. A judge won't overturn a conviction based on. Then we don't go to a judge. Not yet. Morton looked up. What are you suggesting? Julian needs to be transferred. Medical emergency, psychiatric evaluation, something. Get him out of county lockup and into a facility where he can move freely for a few hours. That's insane. Do you know how hard it is to? I know people, Deborah interrupted. Custodians, nurses, admin staff. People who owe me favors. I can make it happen. But I need you to file the paperwork. Make it look legitimate. Morton leaned back, running a hand through his hair. Why are you doing this? Because he's innocent. And because I need him alive. There's more to it than that. Deborah met his eyes. My daughter is dying. Julian Cross is paying for her treatment. If he rots in prison, she dies. If he goes free, we both survive. That honest enough for you? Morton studied her for a long moment. Then he picked up his phone. I'll make some calls. But if this blows up, Ms. Kane, you're on your own. I've been on my own my whole life, Mr. Morton. I'll manage. 5 days later, Julian was transferred to St. Augustus Hospital under the guise of severe chest pains and possible cardiac arrest. The prison doctor had signed off after Deborah, who worked at that very hospital, had whispered the right words to the right nurse, who'd whispered them to the right physician. Julian arrived in handcuffs, flanked by 2 corrections officers. He was placed in a private room on the 3rd floor, monitored but not isolated. At 2:17 p.m., during a shift change, Deborah Kane walked into his room wearing scrubs and a hospital badge. Julian looked up, startled. What are you doing here? Saving your life. Again. She glanced at the door, then moved quickly to his bedside. You've got 3 hours before they take you back. We need to use them. Use them for what? Hollis has an office downtown. He keeps files there, off the books. Financial records, case notes, things he doesn't want in the official system. How do you know that? Because I clean his office. Every Thursday night. Julian stared at her. You're going to break into a prosecutor's office. We are. Tonight. I'm in a hospital bed with 2 guards outside my door. Not for long. She pulled a small syringe from her pocket. This is a mild sedative. Enough to knock the guards out for 30 minutes. I'll slip it into their coffee during rounds. Are you out of your mind? Probably. But unless you've got a better plan, this is what we've got. Julian's heart pounded. If we get caught. We won't. If we do, you'll go to prison too. Deborah's eyes softened. Then we better not get caught. She turned to leave, then paused at the door. Julian Cross, I'm risking everything for you. My freedom. My daughter's life. So when I come back tonight, you better be ready to run. And then she was gone. Julian lay there, his mind spinning, his chest tight. For the first time in weeks, he felt something other than despair. He felt alive. At 9:47 p.m., the hospital corridor was nearly empty. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting long shadows across the linoleum floor. Julian sat on the edge of his bed, still in his hospital gown, his wrists raw from where the handcuffs had been removed for the medical examination. The two guards outside his door, Officer Drummond and Officer Hayes, were drinking coffee from the break room. Deborah had delivered it herself 20 minutes ago, her hospital badge swinging from her neck, her smile warm and forgettable. Just another custodian. Just another invisible woman. Julian watched the clock. 9:52 p.m. His heart hammered against his ribs. Then he heard it, a soft thud. Then another. Silence. The door opened. Deborah slipped inside, her eyes sharp, her movements quick. They're out. We've got 28 minutes before the sedative wears off. Let's move. What about the cameras? Loop footage. I've got a friend in security. We're ghosts for the next half hour. She tossed him a black hoodie and jeans. Change. Fast. Julian didn't argue. He stripped off the hospital gown and pulled on the clothes, his hands shaking. When he looked up, Deborah was already at the door, checking the hallway. Clear. Stay close. They moved through the hospital like shadows, down the back stairwell, past the loading dock, through a service exit that Deborah unlocked with a key she borrowed for maintenance. Outside, the night air was cold and sharp. A silver Honda Civic sat idling in the alley, the driver's seat empty, keys in the ignition. Get in, Deborah said. Julian slid into the passenger seat. Deborah took the wheel. Within seconds, they were pulling out onto the main road, the hospital shrinking in the rearview mirror. Julian exhaled for the first time in what felt like hours. Where did you get this car? Borrowed it from a coworker. She thinks I'm picking up medical supplies. You're lying to everyone. Welcome to my life. They drove in silence for a few minutes, the city lights blurring past. Then Julian spoke, his voice quieter. Why are you really doing this? Deborah didn't take her eyes off the road. I told you. My daughter. No. I mean, yes, I get that. But you didn't have to come to me. You could have sold that evidence to a reporter, a rival prosecutor, anyone. Instead, you walked into a prison and made a deal with a man you don't know. Why? Deborah's grip tightened on the steering wheel. You want the truth? Yes. She was quiet for a long moment. Then, 15 years ago, I was accused of stealing from a family I worked for. The Harrisons. Rich white family in the suburbs. I cleaned their house twice a week. Julian listened. One day, Mrs. Harrison's diamond bracelet went missing. She called the police. Told them I was the only one who'd been in the house that week. They searched my apartment, my car, my daughter's school locker. They didn't find anything, because I didn't take it. Deborah's voice cracked slightly. But it didn't matter. The police believed her. The Harrisons had money, connections. I had nothing. I lost that job. Lost 3 others because word spread. For 2 years, no one would hire me. I couldn't pay rent. Imani and I lived in a shelter. Julian's chest tightened. What happened? Mrs. Harrison's daughter found the bracelet. It had fallen behind a dresser. Mrs. Harrison called me, said it was all a misunderstanding, said she was sorry. Deborah's jaw clenched. She never told the police. Never cleared my name publicly. Just moved on. Like it didn't matter. Like I didn't matter. She finally looked at Julian, her eyes wet but fierce. So when I saw you in that prison, sitting there in an orange jumpsuit, looking like the whole world had forgotten you, I knew exactly how that felt. And I wasn't going to let another innocent person rot because no one believed them. Julian stared at her, something twisting deep in his chest. I'm sorry that happened to you. Don't be sorry. Just don't waste this chance. They pulled into a parking garage downtown. Deborah killed the engine and handed Julian a black baseball cap and a surgical mask. Put these on. Hollis's office is on the 9th floor. Building security does rounds every 45 minutes. We've got 32 minutes before the next one. How do we get in? Deborah held up a key card. Cleaning staff has access to every floor. Perks of being invisible. They moved quickly through the building's service entrance, up the freight elevator, and down a dim hallway lined with frosted glass doors. Deborah stopped in front of one marked Brian Hollis, Assistant District Attorney. She swiped the card. The lock clicked. They stepped inside. The office was pristine, mahogany desk, leather chairs, framed law degrees on the wall. But Deborah moved straight to a filing cabinet in the corner, pulling a small crowbar from her bag. This is where he keeps the off-book files. I've seen him lock things in here when he thinks no one's watching. She jimmied the lock. It popped open. Inside were dozens of folders. Deborah pulled one out, flipping it open under the dim glow of her phone's flashlight. Financial records. Offshore accounts. Jesus, these are tied to Crosstech. Julian leaned over her shoulder, his eyes widening. That's Ashford's signature. And Hollis's. They were embezzling together. Deborah pulled out another file. Email transcripts. Ashford threatened to go to the SEC. Hollis told him to reconsider or face consequences. Julian's hands shook as he read the documents. This is it. This proves Hollis had motive. This proves. The door swung open. Both of them froze. Standing in the doorway, his face twisted in cold fury, was Brian Hollis. Well. The convicted murderer and his little accomplice. I have to say, Cross, I didn't think you had it in you. Julian stepped in front of Deborah instinctively. We have everything, Hollis. The files. The emails. You killed Ashford to cover up your embezzling scheme. Hollis laughed, a low, chilling sound. You think anyone's going to believe a word you say? You're a convicted felon who just escaped custody. She's a cleaning lady with a criminal accusation history. You have no credibility. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. But I'll make you a deal. Give me those files, walk away, and I'll forget this ever happened. You go back to prison quietly. She goes back to her dying daughter. Everyone lives. And if we don't? Deborah said, her voice steady. Hollis smiled. Then I call security, tell them you attacked me, and you both get buried so deep, no one will ever find you. He pulled out his phone. Your choice. 10 seconds. Julian's mind raced. His eyes darted to the window, the door, the files in Deborah's hands. Then Deborah did something Julian didn't expect. She pulled out her own phone and held it up. Say that again, Mr. Hollis. The part about burying us. I want to make sure my live stream caught it. Hollis's face went white. You're bluffing. Deborah turned the screen toward him. A red recording dot blinked in the corner. The view count was climbing. 247 viewers. 389 viewers. 512 viewers. I started streaming the second we walked into your office. Everyone just heard you threaten us. Everyone's watching. Hollis lunged for her phone. Julian grabbed his arm, twisting it back. The two men crashed into the desk, files scattering everywhere. Deborah ran for the door. Deborah, go. Julian shouted. But she stopped at the threshold, torn. Hollis shoved Julian off, reaching for something in his desk drawer. A gun. He aimed it at Julian. No one's leaving. And then the elevator doors at the end of the hall dinged open. 3 police officers stepped out, followed by Peter Morton and a woman with a press badge. Hollis's hand wavered. Drop the weapon, Hollis, one of the officers barked. Now. The gun clattered to the floor. Julian and Deborah stood frozen, gasping for breath, as the officers moved in and cuffed Brian Hollis. Morton stepped forward, his face grim but relieved. "I called them the second Deborah told me the plan. You two are insane." The reporter raised her camera. "Mr. Cross, do you have a statement?" Julian looked at Deborah. She looked back at him. And for the first time in months, Julian Cross smiled. The interrogation room at the precinct was cold and sterile. Julian sat across from Detective Lisa Moreno, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who'd been assigned to review the new evidence. Deborah sat beside him, her hands folded on the table, exhaustion written across her face. It was 2:34 a.m. Detective Moreno spread the files across the table, the financial records, the email transcripts, the access logs. She'd been reviewing them for over an hour, her expression unreadable. "Mr. Cross, you understand that escaping custody, even for a few hours, complicates your case significantly." "I understand." "And Ms. Kane, you drugged 2 corrections officers and aided a convicted felon. That's serious time." Deborah didn't flinch. "I'd do it again." Moreno's eyebrow raised slightly. She looked down at the files again. "Brian Hollis has been placed under arrest. He's lawyered up, refusing to talk. But this evidence, it's damning. The embezzling alone is enough to destroy his career. Add in the murder charge, and he's looking at life." Julian leaned forward. "What about me?" "The DA's office is reviewing everything. Given the circumstances, the new evidence, Hollis's involvement in your prosecution, there's a strong case for your conviction being overturned. But it's going to take time." "How much time?" "Weeks. Maybe months. You'll have to go back to county until the hearing." Julian's stomach sank. "And Deborah?" Moreno looked at her. "Technically, I should be booking you right now. But given your cooperation and the fact that you just helped expose a corrupt prosecutor, I'm recommending you be released on your own recognizance pending review." Deborah exhaled, her whole body sagging with relief. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. If Cross's conviction isn't overturned, you're both going down." Moreno stood, gathering the files. "I'll give you two a few minutes. Then, Mr. Cross, you're going back into custody." She left the room. Julian and Deborah sat in silence for a long moment. Then Julian spoke, his voice rough. "You saved my life tonight. You paid for my daughter's treatment. We're even." "No," Julian said firmly. "We're not." He turned to face her fully. "I've spent my entire life surrounded by people who wanted something from me. Money, connections, status. Everyone had an angle. Everyone had a price." His voice cracked slightly. "But you risked everything. Your freedom. Your daughter's future. For a man you didn't even know. Why?" Deborah's eyes glistened. "Because I know what it's like to be powerless. To scream the truth and have no one listen. And I couldn't watch it happen to someone else. You didn't owe me anything." "Maybe not. But I owed it to the woman I used to be, the one who got accused and had no one fight for her." Julian stared at her, something deep and unfamiliar stirring in his chest. "When I get out of this, and I will get out, I'm going to make sure you and Imani never have to worry about money again. The rest of her treatments, college, whatever she needs. It's covered." Deborah shook her head. "Julian, you don't have to." "Yes, I do. Because you gave me something no amount of money can buy." "What's that?" "Hope." Deborah's breath caught. Tears spilled down her cheeks. Julian reached across the table and took her hand, rough and calloused from years of work, but warm. "I'm going to fight, Deborah. For both of us. I promise you." She squeezed his hand. "I believe you." 3 weeks later, Julian was released on bail pending the appeal hearing. The media firestorm had been relentless, corrupt prosecutor arrested, innocent man framed for murder, cleaning lady hero exposes conspiracy. Deborah's face had been plastered across every news outlet in the city. She hated it. Julian had offered to put her and Imani up in a hotel to escape the press, but Deborah had refused. She didn't want charity. She wanted normalcy. But Julian didn't give up easily. One Saturday morning, he showed up at her apartment unannounced, carrying 2 bags of groceries and a box of pastries from the bakery down the street. Deborah opened the door, stunned. "What are you doing here?" "Making breakfast." "Let me in." "Julian, I told you." "I know what you told me. But I'm not here as a billionaire. I'm here as a friend. Now move." He brushed past her into the tiny kitchen. Deborah stood there bewildered as Julian Cross, former CEO, man who'd once owned a penthouse, began scrambling eggs on her chipped stove. Imani emerged from the bedroom, wrapped in a blanket, her face still pale but her eyes brighter than they'd been in months. The treatments were working. "Mama, who's... Oh my God. You're Julian Cross." Julian turned, smiling. "And you're Imani. Your mom's told me a lot about you. You're the guy she saved from prison." "Actually, she saved me long before that." He plated the eggs and set them on the table. "Sit. Both of you. Eat." They did. And for the first time in months, Deborah felt something other than exhaustion. She felt peace. As they ate, Julian told stories about his daughter Lily, about the early days of building his company in a garage, about the mistakes he'd made along the way. He made Imani laugh. He made Deborah forget, just for a little while, how heavy the world had been. When breakfast was done, Imani excused herself to rest. Julian helped Deborah clean up, the two of them moving in comfortable silence. "You didn't have to do this," Deborah said softly. "I know. But I wanted to." He dried the last plate and set it down, then turned to her. "Deborah, I need to tell you something." "What?" "When this is over, when Hollis is convicted and my name is cleared, I'm walking away from Crosstech. I'm done with that life." Deborah frowned. "What will you do?" "I don't know yet. But whatever it is, I want it to matter. I want to help people the way you helped me." He hesitated, then. "And I'd like you to be part of it. Whatever comes next." Deborah's heart skipped. "Julian. I'm not asking you to decide now. I'm just asking you to think about it. Because somewhere along the way, between that prison visiting room and tonight, you became the most important person in my life." Deborah stared at him, her breath shallow. "You barely know me." "I know enough. I know you're brave. I know you're loyal. I know you'd move mountains for the people you love." He stepped closer. "And I know that for the first time in my life, I want to be the kind of man who deserves someone like you." Deborah's eyes filled with tears. "Julian, I'm just a..." "Don't," he said gently. "Don't call yourself just anything. You're extraordinary. And I think you've forgotten that." Before she could respond, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his face going pale. "What is it?" "It's my lawyer. The appeals hearing. It's been moved up. It's tomorrow." Deborah's stomach dropped. "Tomorrow? That's too soon. We're not ready." "We have to be." He looked at her, his jaw set. "This is it, Deborah. Tomorrow, I'm either a free man, or I go back to prison for the rest of my life." The courtroom was packed. Reporters lined the back rows, cameras positioned outside the building, news vans clogging the street. Julian sat at the defense table in a charcoal suit Peter Morton had brought him, his hands folded, his face calm. But inside, his heart was a war drum. Deborah sat 3 rows behind him, Imani beside her in a wheelchair. The girl was weak, but insisted on coming. "I want to see the man Mama saved," she'd said that morning. Now, as the bailiff called the court to order, Deborah's hands trembled in her lap. Judge Sandra Holloway entered, a stern black woman in her 60s with silver hair and eyes that missed nothing. She'd built a reputation for being fair but unforgiving. All rise. Everyone stood. The prosecutor representing the state was a woman named Rachel Pemberton, sharp and efficient. She stood, adjusting her glasses. Your Honor, the state maintains that while new evidence has emerged regarding Brian Hollis's criminal activities, it does not exonerate Julian Cross. Cross had motive, means, and opportunity. His financial crimes are well documented. The defense is attempting to use Hollis's misconduct as a smokescreen. Peter Morton rose. Your Honor, the evidence is clear. Brian Hollis killed Gregory Ashford to cover up embezzlement he and Ashford were involved in. Hollis then framed my client using fabricated evidence and suppressed testimony. Ms. Deborah Kane witnessed. Objection, Pemberton interrupted. Ms. Kane's testimony is highly suspect. She has a financial arrangement with the defendant. She's been paid over $50,000. Her credibility is compromised. Deborah's stomach twisted. Judge Holloway looked at Morton. Counselor. Your Honor, Ms. Kane came forward at great personal risk before any financial arrangement existed. Her testimony is corroborated by physical evidence, access logs, financial records, and video footage. Video footage that was obtained through illegal means, Pemberton countered. Ms. Kane and Mr. Cross broke into a prosecutor's office. That evidence is inadmissible. The judge frowned. Ms. Pemberton has a point. Evidence obtained through criminal activity. Your Honor, Morton interrupted, his voice urgent. Ms. Kane live-streamed the confrontation with Hollis. That footage is in the public domain. Hollis himself admitted on camera to threatening both Ms. Kane and Mr. Cross. That admission is admissible. Pemberton's jaw tightened. The so-called admission was made under duress, during an illegal intrusion. He pulled a gun on them, Morton shot back. That's not duress. That's attempted murder. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Judge Holloway banged her gavel. Order. I will have order. She looked at both attorneys. I'm going to hear testimony from Ms. Kane. Then I'll make my ruling on admissibility. Deborah was called to the stand. Her legs felt like water as she approached. She placed her hand on the Bible, her voice steady as she swore to tell the truth. Pemberton approached first, circling like a shark. Ms. Kane, you've been paid $50,000 by Mr. Cross, correct? Yes. And you expect more payments in the future? He offered to help with my daughter's medical expenses. Yes. So you have a financial incentive to testify in his favor. I have an incentive to tell the truth. That's why I'm here. Pemberton's eyes narrowed. You claim you saw Brian Hollis leave Crosstech on the night of the murder, but you didn't come forward for weeks. Why? I tried. The police dismissed me. Or perhaps you didn't come forward because you weren't actually there. Perhaps you fabricated this story after learning Mr. Cross had money. Objection. Morton barked. Counsel is badgering the witness. Sustained. Ms. Pemberton, get to your point. Pemberton pulled out a document. Ms. Kane, 15 years ago, you were accused of theft by a family you worked for. Is that correct? Deborah's face went rigid. I was accused. I was never charged. The item was found. But the accusation exists. It establishes a pattern of what? Deborah's voice rose. Of me being a black woman who white people didn't believe? Yes. That pattern exists. The courtroom went silent. Your Honor, Pemberton started. Move on, Counselor, Judge Holloway said quietly. Pemberton glared at Deborah. No further questions. Morton stood for redirect, But before he could speak, the courtroom doors burst open. A woman in her 30s rushed in, flanked by 2 police officers. "Your Honor, I apologize for the interruption. My name is Agent Claire Dawson, FBI. I have urgent testimony regarding this case." Judge Holloway's eyes widened. "Approach." There was a hurried conference at the bench. Then Judge Holloway looked at the courtroom. "We're taking a 15-minute recess. All parties will remain in the building." The gavel banged. Julian turned to Morton, his face pale. "What the hell is happening?" "I don't know. But FBI involvement, that's either very good or very bad." In the hallway, Deborah found Julian leaning against the wall, his head in his hands. "Julian." He looked up, his eyes red. "They're going to send me back. I can feel it. Pemberton's destroying you up there, and now the FBI." "Stop." Deborah grabbed his face, forcing him to look at her. "We didn't come this far to lose now. You hear me?" "Deborah, if this doesn't work, if I go back to prison, they're going to charge you too. You'll lose everything. Imani is alive because of you. Whatever happens, that's worth it." Julian's breath shook. "I can't let you go down for this. You don't get to decide that." "Deborah." She kissed him. It was sudden, desperate, full of all the fear and hope and impossible connection that had grown between them. Julian froze for half a heartbeat, then pulled her closer, his hands in her hair, his heart breaking and mending at the same time. When they pulled apart, both were breathing hard. "What was that?" Julian whispered. "That was me telling you I'm not giving up on you. No matter what happens in there." Before Julian could respond, Peter Morton appeared. "They're calling us back. And Julian, the FBI agent wants to testify. In your favor." Julian and Deborah exchanged a look. They walked back into the courtroom together. Agent Dawson stood at the witness stand, her face serious. "Your Honor, 3 months ago, the FBI opened an investigation into Brian Hollis based on anonymous tips regarding financial impropriety. We've been building a case against him and several other officials involved in a widespread embezzlement and corruption ring." She pulled out a thick folder. "Gregory Ashford was our informant. He was cooperating with us to expose Hollis. The night he died, he was supposed to meet with our agents. He never showed. We believed Hollis had discovered Ashford's cooperation and killed him." The courtroom erupted. Judge Holloway banged her gavel. "Agent Dawson, why are we only hearing about this now?" "Because we didn't have enough evidence to move forward until Ms. Kane's live stream. That footage, combined with the files she and Mr. Cross recovered, gave us everything we needed. Brian Hollis was arrested this morning on federal charges. He's confessed to murdering Gregory Ashford." Julian's knees nearly gave out. Pemberton stood, her face ashen. "Your Honor, in light of this testimony, the state withdraws all charges against Julian Cross." Judge Holloway looked at Julian, her expression softening. "Mr. Cross, you are hereby exonerated of all charges. You are free to go." The gavel banged. The courtroom exploded. Cheers, applause, reporters rushing for the doors. Julian stood frozen, tears streaming down his face. Deborah ran to him. He caught her, lifting her off the ground, both of them laughing and crying at once. Imani wheeled herself forward, tears in her eyes. "You did it, Mama. You saved him." Deborah pulled her daughter into the embrace. "We saved each other, baby." Julian looked at both of them, this woman who'd risked everything, this girl who'd fought to stay alive, and realized something that shook him to his core. He wasn't just free from prison. He was free from the life he'd been living, the empty, hollow existence of power and isolation. And for the first time, he wanted something more. He wanted them. But as the crowd surged around them, Julian's phone buzzed. He glanced at it. A text from an unknown number. Congratulations on your freedom, Mr. Cross. But your troubles are just beginning. Hollis wasn't working alone. And now you've made yourself a target. Watch your back. Julian's blood ran cold. He looked at Deborah, her smile bright and unguarded. He didn't tell her about the message. Not yet. Julian's penthouse had been unsealed by the courts, but returning to it felt like stepping into a mausoleum. The furniture was covered in dust sheets. His art collection stared down from the walls, lifeless, expensive, meaningless. The view of the city skyline that had once filled him with pride now felt like looking at a cage made of glass and steel. He stood at the window, the anonymous text message burning in his mind. Hollis wasn't working alone. You've made yourself a target. 3 days had passed since the exoneration. 3 days of media interviews, calls from his former board members wanting him back, investment firms offering partnerships. Everyone wanted a piece of Julian Cross now that he was vindicated. Everyone except the person who mattered most. Deborah had gone quiet. She'd stopped answering his calls. His texts went unread. When he'd gone to her apartment, a neighbor told him she'd taken Imani to stay with family upstate, something about needing rest away from the media circus. Julian told himself it made sense. She needed space. She needed to focus on her daughter. But the silence felt like abandonment. And then, on the 4th day, she showed up. The doorman called up. "Ms. Kane is here to see you, Mr. Cross." Julian's heart lurched. Send her up. When Deborah stepped off the elevator, she looked different. Tired. Her eyes were red, her shoulders tense. She wore a simple blue dress and carried a worn leather purse. "Hi," she said quietly. "Hi." They stood there, the space between them feeling like miles. "Can I come in?" "Of course." Julian led her inside. She looked around the penthouse, her expression unreadable. "This is where you lived." "Yeah. It's beautiful." "It's empty." Deborah turned to him, her eyes searching his face. "Julian, we need to talk." His stomach dropped. Those 4 words had never meant anything good. "Okay." She set her purse down, folding her hands. "I've been thinking a lot about what happened. About us. About everything." "Deborah. Please. Let me finish." Julian nodded, his throat tight. "When I walked into that prison and made you that offer, I was desperate. I was drowning. I would have done anything to save Imani. I know. But somewhere along the way, it became about more than money. It became about you. About us. And that terrifies me." Julian's chest ached. "Why?" "Because I don't belong in your world, Julian. I'm a cleaning lady. I work 3 jobs. I live in a 1-bedroom apartment with peeling wallpaper. You're a billionaire. You have penthouses and offshore accounts and people who. I don't care about any of that. But I do." Her voice cracked. "Because I've seen what happens when people from different worlds try to be together. I've cleaned the houses of rich families my whole life. I've watched the way they look at people like me, like we're furniture, like we're invisible. I never looked at you that way. You did, Julian. 6 months ago, when I cleaned your office, you didn't even see me. You looked right through me." Julian flinched. She was right. Deborah's eyes filled with tears. "And I'm scared that once the adrenaline fades, once things go back to normal, you'll look at me that way again. You'll realize I'm just the woman who helped you when you had no other choice. And you'll move on." "That's not true." "How do you know? How can either of us know?" Julian stepped closer, his voice urgent. "Because I've had everything, Deborah. Money, power, success. And none of it meant anything. I was empty. I was hollow. And then you walked into my life and reminded me what it feels like to be human, Deborah shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. Julian, you're grateful. That's all this is. You think you love me because I saved you, but I love you because you saw me when no one else did. The words hung in the air. Deborah stared at him, her breath catching. You what? Julian closed the distance between them, his hands trembling as he cupped her face. I love you. Not because you saved my life. Not because of what you did for me. I love you because you're brave and kind and fierce. Because you fight for the people you care about with everything you have. Because when I'm with you, I'm not Julian Cross, CEO. I'm just me. And that's all I've ever wanted to be. Deborah's tears fell faster. I'm scared, Julian. So am I. But I'd rather be scared with you than safe without you. She closed her eyes, his words breaking something open inside her. What if it doesn't work? What if we try and it falls apart and we lose each other? Then at least we tried. At least we were brave enough to take the chance. Deborah opened her eyes, searching his face. You really mean that? Every word. She kissed him, soft and hesitant at first, then deeper, her hands gripping his shirt like she was afraid to let go. Julian held her like she was the only solid thing in a world that kept shifting beneath his feet. When they pulled apart, both breathing hard, Deborah whispered, I love you too. God help me, I do. Julian smiled, a real, unguarded smile. Then stay. Don't run. Don't disappear on me. I won't. I promise. They stood there, foreheads pressed together, the city lights glittering through the windows. And for the first time in both their lives, the future didn't feel terrifying. It felt possible. But downstairs in the lobby, a man in a dark suit watched the elevator numbers climb. He pulled out his phone and dialed. She's with him. Do you want me to proceed? A voice on the other end, cold, clinical, responded. Not yet. Let them think they've won. It'll make what comes next so much sweeter. The man hung up and walked out into the night. 2 days later, Julian woke to find Deborah already up, standing at the window in one of his shirts, coffee in hand. Morning, he said, wrapping his arms around her from behind. Morning. She leaned back into him, and for a moment, everything was perfect. Then his phone rang. Julian glanced at the screen. Peter Morton. I should take this. Go ahead. Julian answered. Peter, what's up? Julian, we have a problem. A big one. Julian's stomach dropped. What happened? Someone leaked your offshore account information to the press. Every news outlet in the city is running stories about hidden assets, tax evasion, potential fraud charges. The feds are opening a new investigation. That's impossible. Those accounts are sealed. Someone unsealed them. Someone with access. And Julian, the leak came from inside your own company. Julian's blood ran cold. Who? We don't know yet. But whoever it is, they're trying to destroy you. Again. Julian hung up, his hands shaking. Deborah turned, seeing his face. What is it? Someone's coming after me. Someone who wants to finish what Hollis started. Deborah's expression hardened. Then we fight. Together. Julian looked at her, this woman who'd already saved him once, who was willing to stand beside him again. I can't ask you to do this. It's too dangerous. You're not asking. I'm telling you. She took his hand. We face this together. Or we don't face it at all. Julian pulled her close, his heart pounding. Okay. Together. But even as he said it, fear coiled in his gut. Because whoever was coming for him had just made their first move. And Julian had a feeling this time, the fight would cost him everything. The betrayal came from the last person Julian expected. Nadia Reeves. his former assistant. The woman who'd helped him wire the $50,000 to Deborah. The woman he'd trusted for 7 years. Peter Morton had traced the leak back to her within 48 hours. She'd copied Julian's offshore account records and sold them to a consortium of his business rivals, people who wanted Crosstech destroyed and Julian buried for good. But what shocked Julian most was the why. Nadia had been in love with him. For years, she'd worked beside him, hoping he'd notice her as more than an employee. When his marriage fell apart, she thought she'd finally have her chance. But Julian had never seen her that way. And when he'd been arrested, when his world collapsed, she'd waited, believing he'd turn to her. Instead, he'd turned to Deborah. A cleaning lady. A woman Nadia considered beneath them both. The rejection had curdled into rage. Now, Julian sat across from her in an FBI interrogation room, Agent Dawson standing in the corner, her arms crossed. Nadia looked different, thinner, her eyes hollow, her designer clothes rumpled. She wouldn't meet Julian's gaze. Why, Nadia? She laughed bitterly. Why? You really have to ask. I trusted you. You used me. Her voice cracked. 7 years, Julian. 7 years I stood by you. I canceled my plans when you needed me. I lied to your wife to cover your late nights. I believed in you. And I valued you. I paid you well. I promoted you. I didn't want a promotion. Nadia's eyes blazed. I wanted you. But you never saw me. You never once looked at me the way you look at her. Julian's jaw tightened. So you tried to destroy me. I tried to wake you up. To show you what happens when you throw away everything for some nobody. Don't, Julian said, his voice dangerously quiet. Don't talk about her. She's using you, Julian. She saw a rich man in trouble and she saved my life when no one else would. She risked everything for me. That's more than you ever did. Nadia's face crumpled. Tears streamed down her cheeks. I loved you. No, Julian said softly. You loved the idea of me. The power, the status. But you never knew me. Not really. Agent Dawson stepped forward. Ms. Reeves, you're facing federal charges for corporate espionage, fraud, and conspiracy. If you cooperate and provide testimony against the people you sold the information to, the prosecution will consider a reduced sentence. Nadia stared at the table, broken. I'll cooperate. Julian stood. I'm sorry it came to this, Nadia. I really am. He walked out, his heart heavy but his conscience clear. 3 weeks later, the federal investigation cleared Julian of all wrongdoing. The offshore accounts were legal, tax shelters his lawyers had set up years ago. The rival consortium was exposed and faced their own legal troubles. Crosstech's board voted unanimously to reinstate Julian as CEO. But Julian turned them down. Instead, he did something no one expected. He sold his shares, all of them, liquidated his assets, and used the money to establish the Ashford Cain Foundation, a non-profit dedicated to providing legal aid to wrongfully convicted individuals and medical assistance to families struggling with catastrophic illness. Gregory Ashford's name, to honor the man whose death had started it all. Cain, for the woman who'd saved him. The press called it redemption. Julian called it freedom. 6 months after his exoneration, Julian stood in the parking lot of St. Augustus Hospital, his hands in his pockets, watching the sunset paint the sky orange and gold. Deborah emerged from the building, exhaustion and joy written across her face. When she saw him, she smiled, that gap-toothed smile that had become his favorite sight in the world. She's in remission. Julian's breath caught. What? Imani. The doctors just confirmed it. The cancer's gone. He crossed the distance between them in 3 strides, lifting her off the ground and spinning her around. Deborah laughed, a sound like music. We did it, she whispered against his shoulder. She's going to live. She's going to thrive, Julian corrected. She's going to medical school, just like she wanted. And she's going to change the world. Deborah pulled back, her eyes shining. She wants to meet you. Properly, I mean. Not in a courtroom or a hospital. She wants to have dinner. The three of us. Julian's heart swelled. I'd love that. They stood there, the hospital behind them, the future ahead. I'm moving, Deborah said suddenly. Julian frowned. Where? Out of the apartment. I can't stay there anymore. Too many bad memories. I found a small house across town. 2 bedrooms, a yard. It's perfect for Imani. That's great. It's lonely, though. Julian raised an eyebrow. Lonely? Deborah looked up at him, her expression vulnerable. I was thinking, maybe it doesn't have to be. Julian's pulse quickened. Deborah Kane, are you asking me to move in with you? I'm asking if you'd want to. Someday. When you're ready. Julian cupped her face, his thumb tracing her cheekbone. I'm ready now. Deborah's breath hitched. Julian, are you sure? I mean, you've got the penthouse, and I've got a 2-bedroom house with a leaky faucet and... He kissed her, silencing every doubt, every fear. When they pulled apart, he rested his forehead against hers. I don't want the penthouse. I don't want the empire. I want you. I want Imani. I want Sunday mornings and burned toast and fighting over the TV remote. I want normal. I want real. Deborah laughed through her tears. You're insane. Probably. But I'm yours. Yes, she whispered. You are. 1 year later, Julian stood in the backyard of the house Deborah had bought, their house now, watching Imani graduate from her first year of pre-med with honors. She was healthy, strong, her smile radiant as she threw her cap in the air. Lily, Julian's daughter, sat beside him, her hand in his. She'd come around slowly, cautiously, but Deborah had won her over with patience and kindness. Now she called Deborah by her first name, and sometimes, when she thought no one was listening, she called her mom. Julian's ex-wife had even sent a card. I'm glad you found what you were looking for. She's good for you. Deborah emerged from the house carrying a cake, Imani's favorite, chocolate with vanilla frosting. Speech time, she called out. Imani groaned, but she was smiling. Julian stood, clearing his throat dramatically. 1 year ago, I was sitting in a prison cell, convinced my life was over. And then a woman I barely knew walked in and whispered 6 words that changed everything. He looked at Deborah. Pay my debt and I'll save you. Deborah's eyes glistened. But the truth is, she didn't just save me from prison. She saved me from a life I didn't even know I was wasting. She taught me what it means to fight for something bigger than yourself. To love without conditions. To be brave even when you're terrified. He turned to Imani. And you, kiddo, you showed me what strength really looks like. You faced down death and didn't blink. You're going to be an incredible doctor. And I'm so damn proud of you. Imani wiped her eyes, smiling. Julian raised his glass. To second chances. To family. To love that saves you. They all raised their glasses. To love. As the sun set and laughter filled the yard, Julian pulled Deborah close. Thank you, he whispered. For what? For seeing me when I was invisible. For believing in me when no one else did. Deborah smiled. You did the same for me. They kissed as the sky turned purple and gold, surrounded by the people they loved, living a life neither of them had thought possible. And in that moment, Julian Cross, former billionaire, former prisoner, former hollow shell of a man, realized something profound. He'd spent his whole life chasing success. But he'd only found it when he stopped running. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next. Click on the image or video showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.